we have Douglas Kang from Hawaii. Where are you, Doug? Oh, you're here. Come on up. Doug's going to talk about creative collaboration and community in the classroom. So give a hand for Doug.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm Douglas Keong, and I'm here to talk about creativity and collaboration. But before we talk about the how, I think it's important to start with the why. And I'm going to start from the perspective of a student. Now, for me in elementary school, I was the kind of student that nobody wanted to teach because I couldn't follow the rules. I didn't sit still. I wasn't good about sitting in circle or raising my hand. I was moving fast and breaking things, like all the time. That was like my thing. And I remember I was sick about a week, and I came back into class, and I'm back to my old antics. And my teacher kind of stopped at circle, and she looked at me, and she said, "You know, Douglas, it was so nice and quiet when you weren't here last week." And to this day, I remember how that felt. It felt like the bottom had dropped out, and it felt like I wasn't there anymore. And the message that she was telling me was that this classroom was a better place without you in it. And to this day, I remember how much that hurt. And so as a new teacher, I always resolved to myself never to have one of those moments. Because I tell myself, you know, I can never control what the kids are going to remember. And so as I move from teachable moment to teachable moment, I want to make sure that those moments are not unintentionally cruel. Now, I think cosmic justice dictates that if you're a difficult student, you're going to come back as a teacher and have to teach students who are just like you. So I'm a student teacher, and I'm working in the first grade with a first grade teacher named Karen Ivins. And Karen had been teaching over 40 years. She was near retirement. She was this stately, elegant woman with silvery hair. And when she spoke, everybody listened. She was magical. And I wanted to study everything about Mrs. Ivins because I wanted to have the kids listen to me when I had my teachable moments. I wanted to have their undivided attention in the classroom. I remember one time we were on the playground, and one of the kids, Justin, was running across the playground after a kickball towards the street. And I yelled after him. I said, "Justin, stop!" And he just kept right on going. And so I yelled even louder. I said, "Justin, stop right there!" And he kept going. And at this point, Karen, who was next to me, she turned around and in a voice not much louder than her classroom voice, she said, "Justin, that's enough." And he immediately put the brakes on and stopped. And he was like farther along than he was when I was yelling at him because he's moving fast. And I thought, if I could just get that voice. There's something about the voice that causes kids to listen to her. So I started to really listen to her, and I thought maybe it's because maybe I have a lower voice. Maybe I need to speak with a higher voice. You know, she never really raised her voice very much, so maybe I was yelling too much. So I tried speaking softer. It didn't really have any effect. They still weren't really listening to me. I would look at how she dressed. I realized, you know, she would actually look very nice. Every day in class, she'd have these beautiful floral dresses, gingham print dresses. So I decided to step up my game. I didn't wear dresses. Well, anyway. But I started to wear, you know, like a polo shirt or a shirt with a tie because I thought, you know, first graders will listen to you more if you dress more nicely. That didn't really make any difference at all. And by the end of the year, I had never really figured it out. I still was not able to have any kind of classroom management at all. But fast forward to, you know, after my elementary school days, I went on to the middle school, and I was a tech integration specialist in the middle school. I was working with teachers, I was teaching kids, and every week I'd go in and meet with the middle school principal. And we would talk, and I'd have my list of things that I wanted to talk about. And the first thing she would do is she'd always say, "Hey, Douglas, how was your weekend? Tell me what you did." And so I'd say, "Oh, well, you know, we went out hiking, and we did this, and we did that." And she'd say, "Oh, great, great. Tell me, you know, what about your kids? How are they doing?" And we'd get into this sort of conversation about nothing really important, and we would sometimes end up chatting for about 20 or 25 minutes before we started talking about the business stuff. And sometimes we just wouldn't even get to talking about which teachers were going to get scheduled into the computer lab during science period. And at first I thought, maybe she's just really bad time manager? Like, so why aren't we getting to all of this stuff? But after a while, I started to see the wisdom of that, because every time she led off the conversation by talking about me, the message she was sending to me was entirely the opposite of what I was getting in second grade. The message I was getting from her was, you are important. You matter. I had it flipped. The important stuff, it was the connection that we had as people. That was what was important. And I started thinking back to my student teaching days, and I realized all those times in between the teachable moments, Karen would be walking up the stairs, she'd have her arms filled with books and papers, and she'd see a student sitting down to tie his shoe, and she'd put the books and papers down on the stairs, and she'd sit down and she'd either help him tie his shoe, or she'd just sort of watch while he tied his shoe and talk to him softly. Kids would pass by her, and sometimes she'd reach out and she'd just ruffle their hair for no reason, just to have that connection. She'd talk to kids, and she remembered things. She'd say, hey, how are you? How's the bunny rabbit? Is your dad back from his trip? I know that he was away. Are you feeling better? You were out. You had a little bit of a cough. Every one of those times, she was making that connection to them as people. And that's when I realized that I was wrong. I wanted to be the master of the teachable moment. I thought that good teaching was built on teachable moments. It's not. Good teaching happens in the spaces between the teachable moments. That's what gives the teaching moments resonance. If you don't have what's in that space, you don't have good learning. And I don't think that my elementary school teacher was a cruel person. I think that remark was unintentionally cruel. But perhaps the real cruelty was she didn't fill the spaces with enough other stuff, so that when she came out with that sort of flip comment, I didn't still see that she cared about me. So that's something that I've carried to this day, and that's why I work to build community into my classroom, because I feel like it's important to give kids opportunities to be who they are. So, I just have a few examples. We do something called Puzzle Day. So in our school, we talk about computer science really is the art of collaborative problem solving. So let's get together and solve some problems together. So we do this right in the beginning of the year. So this is coming up for us on September 1st. And we get kids together from our school and another school, and we work through these puzzles. Just puzzles we find online. You don't have to know any coding or computer science, but you do need to work in a group. And we give prizes. We have the kids work in the library. We decorate everything. We have a photo booth. We make it kind of festive. We give prizes. And it is a lot of fun. I think it really puts the emphasis on what computer science is, and it also raises awareness of the program, because kids are then like, wow, they do some fun stuff in computer science, and it's not what we thought. We work with the University of Hawaii to put on a hackathon for kids, and the hackathon is another chance for them to collaborate with each other. And on those bonds of trust that are built from icebreaker type activities, that's what carries the kids through learning about the coding and learning about the content. That's why building that sense of community is so important. I realized one year I was at Starbucks a lot of the time because I can't do any work at home. I'm too easily distracted. So I would go and sit in Starbucks. And at some point I said, well, if I'm already at Starbucks and most of my kids are stopping by for their Frappuccinos anyway, I'll just say, look, let's turn that into an extra help time. And so that took off like crazy. And oddly enough, there are some kids who would be very reluctant to ask questions in class and raise their hand in the room. But over a cafe mocha at the table, they'll talk a lot about their frustrations or their problems or questions that they had. And we have teaching assistants, so students who have taken the class in previous years come back on a volunteer basis and they help out. And those kids also started staffing some of the Starbucks office hours. So we tried to create more opportunities to have informal conversations about the work that we're doing. We started thinking about the final exam. What are some kinds of things that we can do in the exam to make it a little bit more collaborative? Because traditionally, we have the kids collaborating all through the year, but then when they're doing the final exam and they raise their hand and they have a question, we're kind of like, no, I can't help you. You have to do that on your own. So how can we make this a little more collaborative? And so what we do for our final exam is we give kids 4 questions ahead of time, like 4 or 5 days ahead of time. We'll pass out 4 questions, and they're lengthy coding-related questions. We patterned some of them off of the CSA questions. So you have to actually write code to solve a problem where we lay out the context of the problem. But we give the question out in advance because it's principals and they work through it. They can even put their code into an IDE and test it out and make sure that it works. But when they come in on the day of the exam, they can't have any notes. They just have to be familiar with all 4 problems. We're going to pick one at random, and they're going to need to solve it, pencil and paper. And then about halfway through the exam, we stop and we have them switch papers with somebody else. We've actually already made up the pairings. The kids think it's random, but it's not random. We pair up kids of similar abilities and who have different questions. And you're going to get back somebody else's question, and that's your chance to then go through and make comments on the code that that person has written. And so some kids who have prepped that question will say, oh no, this is wrong. Don't forget you need to do this. Or this loop starts at the wrong place. This should be this. And they make comments and suggestions, and then we pass them back, and they have another half an hour before the exam is over to turn it in. And what we find is that for the most part, kids take that feedback that somebody else has given them, and they improve their question, and then that's what we grade. In a few cases, kids look at the feedback and they say, no, I'm going to stick with what I had, and that's fine too. But in general, what we found is that exercise makes sure that kids are prepping all 4 questions, and they're being, in some way, they're being asked to demonstrate their knowledge on 2 out of those 4. And so that's been kind of a neat experiment for us that we've been working with. So, you know, I find that the more opportunities you give kids to be themselves, the more you learn about them, and the more you get to see who they are. And you know, I'll just summarize with a story from one of my colleagues at Punahou in Hawaii. She and her husband bought a house on this hill, and on the grounds of that house there was this tree that made some of the worst oranges you can possibly imagine. I mean, these oranges are like sour. They had a thick skin. They didn't give much juice. They were really horrible. And so she was saying, you know, I don't see any value in this tree. We should just cut the tree down. And he was like, well, hold on a second. Wait, because, you know, I have a friend who's a farmer, and let's see what he thinks. So they had this friend over, and he comes over for dinner, and he looks at these big orange fruit, and he goes, oh, no, those aren't oranges. Those are lemons. Who knew? It's a variety of lemon that's orange, but it's big, right? But the funny thing is, as soon as they knew that they were lemons, they're like, wow, these are really sweet. These are really good lemons. They get a lot of juice. Her kids started coming up with like all of these recipes. Like he made this lemonade. You just need 3 of them to make a pitcher of lemonade. They made key lemon pie. The neighbors started coming over. Let's try the fruit from this tree. It was amazing. You know, but the funniest thing was the fruit itself didn't change. What changed was the context. And when we were thinking about these as bad oranges, they were one thing. But when you started thinking of them as sweet lemons, oh, now all of these possibilities arise. And I worry a lot of the time that I do that with kids. Sometimes, you know, we try to put labels on them. We think about them in a certain way, and we say, well, I just don't really see what the use is. I don't see where this kid could be valuable. But when you change up your instruction and you provide lots of opportunities for kids to be good in different ways, that's when you start to see them for who they really are. And that's where you start building all of that space, all of that community between the teachable moments that really lends them resonance. Thanks a lot. How are we doing on time? Okay, great.
Hi.
Yeah. Yes, Luna. Yeah.
Luna from Information Technology, New York. So you kept saying you do the whole event, the puzzle day, throughout the whole school. The exam system is throughout the whole school, or only you and a couple more computer science teachers?
Puzzle Day is for any computer science students and teachers, and anyone interested in computer science. And you know, we might have 100 kids sometimes come and show up on a Saturday morning from 8 till 12. We use the Harvard CS50 curriculum, and they provide the Puzzle Day kits. They provide little goodies, and it's all free. So and Puzzle Day is what Harvard does. And that helps to build the camaraderie. The final exam was just something that we did in our AP class. There's a culture of final exams at the school. They kind of expect you to give a final exam, but we started to question, why does it have to be the blue book exam? Everybody's sitting one to a table, and so we're trying to change it up. And hopefully we'll see this sort of, you know, This would work with other subjects too. Hey.
Dan from Napa. 4 questions. Do you create them yourself, or are they from the practice from the College Board?
We create them ourselves.
Do you have a bank that you could add to the PowerPoint?
I have added them to there's like a teacher community for CS50, and I think I've added them there. But yeah, I'm certainly happy to share them with you.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you.